is going to be fresh.
I was telling Mark about this topic, and he said, well, you never lost it. Like, you always had a strong identity. And from his perspective, that was really good to hear. Like,
Yeah.
that's how he sees it.
Yeah.
Because
Is that how you?
no, I felt lost and covered at times and unidentifiable, except by I'm so-and-so's mom, or I'm Mark Robison's wife. And that was early on. Like, he's always, since I've known him, he's either been in the pulpit or he's been leading something. He's always been leading something. I've known him since he was 18.
Wow.
And he's always been leading something. And yeah, I signed up for that. And I don't have a problem with that. I don't feel like I'm a shrinking violet. But I do feel like I could get lost in his success and his visual. And we spend a lot of time with people. I'm a people person. Mark says, we wouldn't have friends if it weren't you, like, initiating this.
Yeah.
Because he's happy to just kind of be out there and then come back in.
Yeah.
And so we spend a lot of time with people, and often, people look to him in conversations because just for all kinds of different reasons. And it's not because he asserts himself first.
Yeah.
He doesn't do that. And so, but people look to him, and I find that, and there are messages that I can listen to in my head when that happens.
Yeah.
That make it hard, or I can say, no, those are his abilities, his gifts, his talents, whatever you're going to call them. I have mine too. And so I process quite a bit, often. But I would say we became official empty nesters about 20, well, we're not official, because we have kids that live with us and don't, and they're transitioning and things. And so, but we did move into that. Like, I changed my role as, like, commander-in-chief of the household and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I found all this wealth inside of me that I kind of had inklings of through the years, but it became like a geyser. And people noticed it. I saw it. And it was just confirming, not affirming, but confirming of who I knew myself to be.
Well, tell me about, like, the journey kind of into that, right? The journey like, you get married and you had kids right away. And so, like, you've never really had a chance to even be just Ingrid, right? Like, what is Ingrid? You had so much stuff that went on during that time.
Yeah. So, yeah, we did have children right away, 10 and a half months after we were married.
Yeah.
And I am so thankful. I believe in God's timetable. And I'm so thankful because that helped me learn to set priorities. What's my priority in my heart? And my priority was to stay home. So I did campus life, Youth for Christ, until had the baby.
Yeah.
And then after that, we volunteered as a couple for years, took our kids with us to club or have Bible studies at the house or small groups for the kids, and our kids would be hanging out, and we did that for years. So I think I knew to keep who I believed I was created to be, to keep that, I had to volunteer. I didn't want to leave my home and be paid because of the commitment that meant. So I just packed my kids in the car and we went to food pantries and volunteered, we just did everything together.
Yeah.
I did, I homeschooled in the beginning, and part of our homeschool was we finished our schoolwork and then we went out and did things in the community. So, oh my gosh, that was life-giving for me because I feel like I was created as a social worker. I mean, I was created for more than that.
I can see that.
Oh my gosh.
I can see that.
Oh my goodness, you know? And so I had, for my own heart and mind, soul, all of it, I had to be out doing things. I wanted to be home with my kids. So we found all kinds of avenues, whether it was through our church or in the community. That like kept this sweet space in my heart in the midst of changing diapers and homeschooling and running to sports and all of the things. So all of our marriage, I have worked on keeping that place inside me. And it's been pivotal. So I went through a health journey, a really hard health journey for 7 years. Even during that, and I still had teenagers at home, I did small groups at the rescue mission with women. And that, through the ups and downs of health and mental health and the struggles, even then, I had that sweet, protected space inside me that was so life-giving. And I continue to do that. And that has been ups and downs because you can find your identity in what you do rather than who you are. So there's always, I think that's always going to be a balance. I love the part of the Holy Spirit that he's our wonderful counselor. So he's going to be like right now, a time in my life, it's like, you are not living with margin in your life. I mean, I keep hearing that word, and I need to find my margins because there's so much to do, and I want to do, but yet inside me, my well is, I have this much capacity left.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about those margins, because I feel like when young people get married and then you have children, no one ever talks about having that time set aside, right? And even when I say it or I hear it, this thought comes like, is that selfish? You know, that thought comes to my mind. Is that selfish? Or should, like, what does that even look like? How are we able to, I guess, tend with that thought of selfishness versus like, no, like, if I have this space, I can be the best mother I can be. You know, it helps me be the best wife that I can be when I have that space.
So as a young mom, I had a mentor that said to me, because I was struggling with anger, like frustration all the time. And she said to me, ask yourself these questions. Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Are you tired? Yes, yes, and yes. And she said, then tend to those things. If those are all you have energy to tend to, start there. That was incredible. So one of the things was I would get up in the morning and I was so depleted, whether it was nursing through the night or being up with kids, and I would just be so anxious and irritable. And I realized my blood sugar was low. And so I started drinking a quick protein shake because I didn't have time to make myself whatever. So that was the beginning of learning for me of how to have margins, how to look at myself and not just everybody else. Because when I didn't look to myself, there were all kinds of things that came out that were not good. Because I was depleted. It's like I was going to rocky ground, and when you go into rocky ground, what comes up? Gravel and dirt, and there's no fruit. There's nothing good that can come from it. So when we give to ourselves, and I think we need direction on that, because what works for me is not going to work for somebody else. And that's the beauty of self-care. What takes care of myself? And so I found some things that work for me, and when I don't do them, I'm like, ugh, this is what's coming out of my life. And for me right now, it's pure exhaustion. And I know that is a sign that I do not have these, I call them the bookends, you know. I don't have these margins that I can reach into for sustenance. That doesn't mean I'm not doing my quiet time. I'm not eating. It means I need some things that are going to be more than just this little thing, that little thing. It's like that little pick, pick, pick. No, I need something that'll go a little bit deeper. What is that?
Yeah.
And so when I do that, that helps me have just a better sense of my own identity, my own abilities, my own boundaries. Oh my goodness. So that's what I'm learning.
Yeah.
And I feel like for me now, I can gain from what I learned in the past. And so that's why if we start and stop on self-care, that's okay, because that's part of our growing process.
Yeah.
So we learn and say, that worked, that didn't. I'm going to take this forward and leave that behind. So I started drinking my protein powder again.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. The past 2 days have been so much better because I'm getting more protein inside of me because I can get so busy and eat a my daughter calls me like a fruit and nut person. I'll eat a piece of fruit and a handful of nuts and think that's it. But that's what we do.
Right.
That's what we do.
Right.
We're like, oh, I'll do a little bit here, do a little bit here. Why is this not working?
Yeah.
You know, and so I think we need to go a little bit deeper into that self-care.
Yeah.
Add a little bit more. If we have a half hour and it's not working, add 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. Oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of add.
Absolutely.
If it's not working.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm learning.
I think what I love about this particular podcast is because I know you.
Yeah.
You know me.
Yeah.
We've been doing life together. You know, we call it a family, right?
Yeah.
Friend and family, that's how close we are. And I've been able to see like Ingrid at work, Ingrid at home. I've seen all different sides of Ingy B.
A mom.
A mom.
Yep.
I don't think we talk enough about the different roles and the impact that has on the mental health.
Yeah.
Because there be all these different things.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's a statement that I've been saying for the longest time is that visibility does not determine your value. And some of the roles you've been doing has been behind the scenes.
That's good. Yeah.
How have you still been able to feel like a valuable part of the team?
Oh, that's so good. I think it starts for me in the mind.
Okay.
My thoughts and what I think and say to myself. And that is the beginning for me of if I'm starting to feel and things inside me that I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not this, I'm not that, I look at those thoughts and how they're affecting my emotions, which will affect my behavior. And so the roles are not going to go away.
Right.
They're not.
Right.
You know? And I've tried to hide from them, you know? But they don't go away. But the thing that I need to tell myself when I feel like I'm not measuring up in this area and that area and that area, these are just hats I wear. I put on this hat, I'm a mom. I put on this hat, I'm a wife. I put on this hat, I'm a community server, whatever.
Right.
But when it comes down to the very, very core, I can take those hats off and I can just be his. And that is my source. That's my source. I can just be his and just be.
Yeah.
Just be. He's the I am. And so he's the one that can say to me, because I am, you are.
Yeah.
You are. You're this. You're my love. You're my daughter. You're my encourager.
Yeah.
You're my whatever.
Yeah.
And that helps me a lot.
Yeah.
When those hats become weights, or those hats become too heavy on my, in my mind, in my emotions.
Yeah.
I realize, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? Oh, this is just a hat. I think right now I'm going to take this hat off. Doesn't mean I'm leaving that role. It means I'm taking the hat off for a minute and I'm just going to be here. I'm just going to be. And I'm just going to rest and let him fill up that well And then he'll say, or direct me, put the hat back on, or keep the hat off for a minute.
Yeah.
Just wait. We all say, God's got this.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes in those moments with him, he shows us how he's got it. And he'll say, no, not now, don't do that. Or yes, put it back on because I've got you, I want you over there, but I'm going with you.
Yeah.
Instead of, I used to tell people, I felt like I would put God on a leash.
Yeah.
Come on, God, let's go over here and do this.
Yeah.
Well, that's when the hat gets heavy and the weights turns into weights because we're just doing it in our own ability, strength, mindset, all of those God wants to use. But if we give him time and we take those off and we let him just be him to us, then those hats aren't as heavy. Those roles aren't as all-consuming. Because again, they're not going to go anywhere because we're going to continue to just be in life. There's going to be demands. There's going to be, it's just going to be.
Yeah, and I've seen the results of you having that, right? I was in Chicago about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago for GLS. And they had like a private dinner where people would come up and meet like Craig Rochelle and Amy and things of that nature. It was really cool. And I remember this one moment marked me. This one moment, I'll never forget it. We got up from the table, me and a friend of mine, we walked over and we saw Craig Rochelle and Amy. And my friend goes to Amy, is like, hey, are you here to support Craig? That's what he said to her. And her response was, I love supporting my husband and I will support him, but I'm also leading a breakout session this year at GLS. And so when she said that, I loved her response because she acknowledged, yeah, I'm going to support my husband, but I'm also called to do this too.
Yeah.
And I've seen you do that.
Yeah.
I've seen you do that.
Yeah.
So how long did that take for that process to happen? Like we've talked, you said earlier that people would just talk to your husband and not look at you. Like, how do you do? I mean, you've helped me and my wife out in these kind of situations as well. Like, how are you able to get to that point where you're like, they're not meaning to make me feel diminished. They're not meaning to devalue me.
Right.
Like, how do you respond in that?
Yeah, so I think practice, like with anything, you just keep practicing it. And I am a verbal processor. And so I like to talk to Mark or a mentor or a close friend about, I got this going on inside of me. You know, I've had multiple counselors, but I've always had a mentor. That's something that's been very important to me. And so I verbally process with someone. I'm a journaler. And so writing things out and just asking the Holy Spirit, okay, how do you want to apply yourself in this situation for me?
Yeah.
And I think practice, though. I think instead of telling yourself, well, I'll never be good at this, or it's always going to be this way, or just those negative messages, identify them and challenge them, because I've been doing this, like I said, since I've known him.
Yeah.
And we've been together a long time. And I've learned I may feel this way, but is that always the truth? So, and sometimes I just let it be. Often, that's how I handle it. I stand and I smile, and I'm polite. And it's just so interesting because some people acknowledge that and other people, they don't. But my response does not need to be dependent on what they do. How I feel, how I think, how I process doesn't have to be dependent on what they do or don't do.
Yeah.
I have to see the situation and say, okay, this is what's happening, and then work on it within myself. So often, when that happens, and if I need to excuse myself from the conversation or whatever it is, I almost always find somebody to connect with because I like to connect. God
You do.
knows that.
You do.
So I find somebody, and Mark and I have always said, even when we were both 18, because we're just 16 days apart, he'd say, we just work a room, like work a room. He goes one direction, I go the other, because he knows that I'm not always going to connect with who he connects with.
Yeah.
So we'll stand together for a while, and then I'll find someone or something to connect with, and he'll find somebody, and we meet back together.
Yeah.
We just have been learning together and growing together in this. And I'm okay being by myself because I realize, well, maybe there's just not someone for me to connect with right now. And that's okay. Practice,
Yeah.
process
Yeah.
through it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say sometimes things get lost in translation? Like when someone is saying something, let's say they disregard you and they're talking to Mark, right? I think sometimes we translate that and saying, I'm not as good as Mark.
Yeah.
I'm not as smart as Mark.
Yep.
Or I'm not as valuable as Mark.
Yep.
And so John Acuff talks about there's 3 questions he always asks himself, right? When he has these thoughts, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it kind?
Yeah.
And I feel like you're kind of going through that in your mind a little bit.
Yeah.
What stopped you from comparing yourself to Mark? Or those times ever happen of you being like, man, I'm not as cool as this guy?
I do it all the time. I do it all the time because his giftings and who he is lend him to just be in situations like that.
Yeah.
He doesn't put himself forward, and you know it.
Right.
He doesn't.
He does not.
But he will speak his mind
Absolutely.
and wisdom or whatever it is. And so since I've known him, he's always been like that. So I think what helps me the most is, again, we talk about those margins. When we have those times where we do self-care, you get to know yourself a little bit more. And so you learn tools that help yourself. So often, Josh, it still happens. We've been married 35 years. It happens all the time where I think, I'm not as smart as Mark. I'm not as talented. I'm not as gifted. I'm not as pursued or whatever. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because I know I'm important. I'm valuable. I'm gifted. I'm talented. I have my own. And I'm still learning that. I'm still learning what to say to myself in the midst of it. Because honestly, we'll be in a conversation and I can feel myself do this.
Wow. Just regress.
And then when I feel my body language like that, I sit back up and I choose to honor and respect what God is doing in and through him. Because I love what God has done and is doing in and through him. I love it.
Yeah.
I admire him. You know, I'm a huge fan.
Marky Mark t-shirt, right?
I am a very huge fan. I respect him.
Yeah.
And that is my focus. So when I notice I'm doing this, I choose to sit back up and just listen.
Yeah. Can I add to that you don't just sit back up in some situations, you also help lift his arms up too.
Yeah.
And I think of the picture of Moses, right? Or the Red Sea, had his arms lifted.
Yeah, with Aaron and her.
Yeah. And I feel like sometimes you see in some areas that instead of lifting the arms, people are pulling the arms down.
Yeah.
You see that pull because of this not having the same thing, not being okay with, man, they're being seen, but I also know I'm also seen.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And knowing that there's just an audience of one.
Yeah. And I also have a partner that supports me in what's inside me. Always. Always has he supported. He's watched the kids when they were growing up so that I could go out and have meetings or appointments or whatever, volunteer somewhere. Always bringing people home into our home that he's like, I have no idea who this person is.
That was me.
Yeah. No, he knew you first. But bringing people home, he just greeted him at the door. Oh, nice to meet you. I'm Mark. And I'd say, I'll tell you later. He's just been so supportive.
Yes.
And we've always had a conversation when he knows I'm overdoing. We have this kind of code conversation. Instead of him saying, no, don't do that, or no, or whatever, we have this conversation. And it's been from the beginning, and it always brings me back. So we were having this conversation last night, and I said to him, I don't know how many yeses I have left. And he said, okay, let's talk about that. And we processed it. Mostly I talked and he listened because our dynamic.
Yeah.
And I said, I could do this, but not that. What do you think about that? He said, that sounds good. So he's, like my cheerleader and my, sounding board, and willing to let me overdo and support me when I'm cooked and I can't go anymore, and he'd support me by dialoguing with me, cooking dinner.
Yeah.
He does laundry, all the things. We're just, that helps. I know not everybody has that in, that support when they're trying to find their own identity and who they are and what their gifts and talents are, how to use them.
Yeah.
I do have that. I'm very fortunate. And so I would say if you don't have that, pray and ask God, show me who can help me in this journey. Because not only are we not to walk without, he wants us to walk with him, but with one another.
Right.
And you guys have been like sounding boards for us at times too. I mean, we've let our guard down with certain safe people that can speak into our life and say, how about this? What do you think about this? And so, ask God, who can I have, since I don't have that? Who can I have? Who can help me with this? Because my identity is important to God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's
he
so good.
wants us to see him, to see ourselves as he sees us. And so why wouldn't he care about our identity, our thoughts, our emotions, our behaviors, our dreams, our passions? Of course he does.
Yeah.
So he's committed to them. And so he's got a way for us to learn and grow into them.
Man, that's so good. Thank you, Ingy B, for being with me.
Yeah.
Honestly,
anytime.
I think for me, I knew I wanted to have you on because God has given you such an ability to just be raw and be vulnerable and transparent. And so I appreciate you being on this show and being transparent with us here. And this episode would not be possible without our friends and family at Windows, Doors, and More.
It's gonna be fresh.